All right, I'll let you take it away. This will be like about a 20-minute talk, but it definitely can go further. So we're just gonna have fun.
Yeah, this is a good talk, not only just between us, but like with you guys, if you have anything you want to interject.
Yeah.
Please join in. Thank you. Perhaps shortly. So, as Jeff Koons said, I have a background in visual storytelling, and one thing that strikes me about Nick's sort of background in his work is there's a strong visual narrative aspect to the work that has to happen in classical education when it comes to painting. Subject matter, you're conveying something because traditionally you were hired by somebody to do something. Art wasn't sort of a fanciful thing of I want to do something. It was a matter of a livelihood, and people would say, well, we want this, and the artist had to understand how to convey that message to an audience. And as time has gone by, we're allowed now to kind of make art by declaration, and in that sense, we don't have to tell anybody anything anymore. So the story really only has to be between the creator and themselves. So the way I kind of look at it is commercial art, illustration, writing, film. You have to convey something to a large audience. He only has to answer the question for himself. So don't look at what he does. So it's so, and one thing that Nick and I both share is a sort of a love, I guess, of comic books and as kids, and that visual narrative is a pretty strong influence. I know for me, and it was a big, strong influence on Nick. And we use the name heavy metal tonight. We're not talking about throwing the horns and banging our heads. We're talking about a magazine that started in, I guess, the mid-70s, which was a collection primarily of European artists that were bound together in a magazine and sold here in the U.S., which was sort of kind of like a forbidden fruit that was hard to find, and when we found it, it was...
I mean, it was revolutionary.
Yeah.
Sort of changed everything.
Yeah. Well, it felt like you shouldn't be looking at it when you first came across it. You're like, this is for obviously big kids, or there's naked adults. Yes, there's naked people and all sorts of things happening that don't happen with people in superhero comics.
Even the narratives. I mean, they weren't like necessarily. There were people in underpants and capes, but like
for entirely different purposes.
But different purposes. Yeah. And so the stories were completely confounding sometimes.
For sure.
A lot of science fiction and fantastical stuff.
Yeah.
Erotica.
Yep. And we got to see Mobius for the first time in that context, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
So I guess I was knee deep, ankle deep, waist deep, neck deep in comic books by the time that came out for me. And so I didn't gravitate to heavy metal as like, this is the answer for me, but it was this thing that I looked at as a sophisticated product. And I'm wondering like what you carried away from heavy metal, as you went on, was this a things can be different for you?
I mean, I grew up looking at, my mom was like feeding me like Rembrandt and Degas.
Okay, so
I grew up with like the fine art thing.
Yeah.
So I was looking at Da Vinci and stuff like that. So that was always there, but at the same time, then it was like comics and like, Frank Frazetta and stuff.
Well, how were they viewed? Like, what did your mom think about them?
I don't know if my mom knew I was looking at that.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure where I got it from, actually.
Yeah.
My dad, it could have been, this is like the era of like Playboy and Pentagon, which was just like...
Which is where you found, in the woods, you would find the Playboys and the heavy metal. So you'd be like, we just stopped by.
Well, they were sort of in the same rock.
The 70s were a crazy time.
Yeah, the 70s were kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But they were in the same rack, too.
Sure,
Maybe
they
I
were.
did see it in a bookstore or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I got them, but they were obviously striking.
Yeah.
And I think they started to emerge for me right at the time I discovered punk rock as well.
Okay.
So the whole punk scene and that aesthetic almost happened simultaneously. So everything, speaking of Rush, we were talking earlier about Canadian bands.
So punk.
And I was like, it was like, you know, it was the era, I'm really dating myself here now. So it was like the era of like Kiss and disco and Rush. Yeah. And then my older brother brought home the first Ramones album. And that was just kind of like, I had no idea what to make of that.
Yeah.
And probably within the same couple of months, somebody handed me a heavy metal magazine.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like, yeah. So I don't know, it's not kind of hard to remember, I guess.
Yeah.
Blade Runner happened around the
Sure.
same time. Like all of this, there was this culture of Alien,
Yeah.
Mobius, Giger,
Yeah. No, it all happened sort of like,
Jodorowsky.
right after Star Wars, there was this sort of like rush of all this like strong, intense things were happening.
Yeah.
Musically and visually.
Is that what you're asking? Like how did it?
It's okay. But like, so I mean, I looked at it strictly as I saw the narrative aspect. I'm like looking at this and I'm seeing storytelling, and you know, and I'm really kind of blown away by how the artwork was handled, because the artwork wasn't handled like a comic book that I was familiar with. It was handled closer to, we're talking Degas, Rembrandt. We're looking at all these, you know, fine artists from Europe, and that the European comic book felt more painterly. It felt more illustrative in that respect.
They were also, I mean, whatever they must have been feeding off the American underground comics, like Art Rum and people that were just predating those guys.
Yeah.
And whatever that was happening with the psychedelic scene, because a lot of the, you know, stories made no sense at all if you were a kid coming out of like comic books, you know? Yeah. It was just like, what? And why is it suddenly so big? And why is there just like, what? And why is everybody melting? And why is there a machine there now? It's just this kind of, it was almost like a visual linear narrative. Maybe that's what maybe that's what kind of sticks in terms of transforming classical traditional narratives, like linear narratives, where suddenly, I don't know, I'm actually going to say this in public, material dialecticism.
Wow.
You know, like, it's almost like taking visual elements and putting them together in ways that they are not necessarily supposed to work.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. And I think when I first, you know, when we first hung out around your artwork, like that's the first thing that struck me. I was like, oh, this feels like I'm looking at sort of painted heavy metal, you know, panels, you know, that they were. And you have some your earlier pieces do have a very comic book feeling, because you sort of segment things off within the panel of the artwork, like this. Like this is very comic book in a form factor. I've taken this. So you said that your mom like fed you on a steady diet of classic artwork. And I had that as well. And I just wonder, but your classical training reflects that, but what you do now doesn't reflect that in concept or execution. Technique is there. So where were the influences? Like, how did you get to, like, was it Bruegel and Dali, or like who were the people that you?
Yeah, I mean, like, that was probably one of the first weird feeds would be like Bosch and Dali and that crowd. So those are great examples of, I mean, I think some of the great classical painters, especially when you're like, they gotta tell a story in one image.
Yeah.
So you gotta get the whole story, or maybe the apex of the story in a single image. And the whole movement has gotta talk about that. And then, I don't know if you've ever done this, and I wasn't raised reading the Bible, and most of these are biblical scenes. So if you go and you read the passage, and then try to find it in the painting, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like Rembrandt, you're just like, what the hell is he talking about? Like this past muster with the church? I'm like, I don't know.
There's a good chance that they didn't read it either.
Like, it's like Jodorowsky's Dune, you know? He's like, I don't know, it's gonna be great.
The church they were clients. I've worked with plenty of my clients who have no idea what they're actually asking for.
Right.
So they've been told to get something, and they go, okay, well, this is what I'm asking
Yeah. And so I think, like, they're just making shit up.
Yeah.
And they're being like, you know, this is the reason I've got the gig, but really I want to paint that.
Mhm.
This is the story that I really want to tell.
Right.
So they're just like, yeah, sure, I've got to hedge it a little bit to like satisfy them, but I'm telling this story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could, if any of you watched the Leonardo, what is it, Ken Burns' Leonardo series he did on PBS?
Oh,
It's so good. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, he definitely is like, yeah, I'll do that what you want, and he just does whatever he wants. and
Right.
He just doesn't care, which is
Right.
beautiful.
It is, and heavy metal was like that, I think.
I think so too.
It was kind of like, I'm kind of tired of the same comic book tropes.
Right.
And they were like, they had this vision. They were
Yeah.
like, we're gonna completely transform this.
Yeah, I think once again, they were either assigned X amount of pages, and they did whatever they wanted within a certain, confine of pages. And then there might be a little bit of loss in translation for us on the US side, because
Oh,
the guy, I'm friends with the guy who lettered all the stuff and heavy metal in the
Was he the
70s.
translator too?
No, but he was given things, and so like, I mean, who knows what.
Right.
So he's there, writing something else, and he can't call, the Belgian artist and say, so exactly what did you want to have happen here?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think another, I don't know how much, I suspect that a lot of this, because a lot of this is circulating on subculture, is like American European subculture. Another figure, for better or worse, that keeps coming back into my kind of psyche of the subculture is William Burroughs.
For sure, yeah.
And this whole idea of like the cut up, you guys know the cut up whole thing?
The cut up. So most famous person to use it is David Bowie.
Right.
So
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan. They would take words from magazines and they would just cut things up and then randomly pull them out and then assemble them. And what they got was where their story narrative, whatever they were going to say, came from.
And so Brian Geisen and William Burroughs were doing this with whatever else they were doing, and they were like making up these. I mean, I guess the legend is that Naked Lunch is written that way, and he was just kind of checked out. He was like doing whatever he was doing. Somehow I feel like I can't say it, but you all know what I'm talking about, anyways. I don't know. And that a lot of that he doesn't remember writing it, but I think some of it was as you read it, it reads like a cut up.
Right.
And I think I think the base idea of that is that you're taking a linear narrative, you're reconfiguring it, and you're coming up with third elements, or like this third way, or whatever they came up. Third mind is a term they used.
Is it like what is it, the exquisite corpse? So like
It's totally like that.
you're
I mean, that's where they got it from.
Yeah.
was the surrealists.
So they're taking
Are,
they're taking the connective tissue and making the connective tissue to sort of make a whole out of something.
And it changes the way, the thing you're reading or listening to in a way.
Right.
It sort of, it enters in like a sort of a, I don't know, an esoteric element.
Yeah. So dipping our toes into the esoteric. I guess with the work here, you talk about the landscape, the interior landscape.
Oh yeah.
Right. So this unconscious sort of creativity or sort of source of creativity is I guess, part of your process and trying to sort of channel into that to not, because I guess let's get there by what made you toss the anchor out the side of the ship and stop and be classical, formal, narrative work, and then say, I'm only going to go into my own creativity?
Yeah, we talked about this a little last night, but I think I don't know. It was like I think it was part of a larger crisis that was going on in my life at the time. But I think the classical realist stuff felt like it was starting to kind of like come to it. It wasn't like satisfying. It was clumsy. It was too literal, and I was trying to figure out what else to do, and I was trying to assess it, and the thing that it just suddenly was like, okay, well, the promise of, I said this last night, I don't know maybe if I'm repeating myself. The promise of like the Renaissance is learn to draw real good first, learn to draw and paint real good, and then that's just the beginning. Now you gotta invent stuff, invention, the Renaissance invention you're supposed to invent. The invention is your painting, basically. So all of the great like Renaissance paintings that we're aware of are inventions, right? So I was like, okay, well that's good. That's a challenge. I'll take that. Whereas the modernists were like, do not learn that stuff. Don't do that. Don't learn to draw realistically and traditionally because that will kill your imagination.
Right.
So I took those two things as challenges basically, and I was like, I don't know. I got nothing to lose at this point. It's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah.
So I'll just like ditch. I'll just totally leave all that. Leave observation behind for at least the time being, and just go strictly imagination.
But how do you not allow decades of technique to sort of put the thumb on the scale in that direction when you're working?
I mean, that was kind of the point. I was sort of like, so the idea then is, will this stuff translate?
Right.
How much of this was worth it, I guess? How much of this will support me being able to translate whatever's gonna come out?
Yeah. Because you talk about the idea that, the going against the convention of world building and,
Oh, yeah.
and elements of structure in a sense. And I always think of the fact that like Schrodinger's cat, our being there changes the thing regardless of you can be totally zen, like a zen, calligrapher who's going to make a mark that's never been made before in the experience of mankind. But there's the human hand, there's emotion, there's always elements that come into play, and their whole goal is to get to that 0 point to be able to kind of create something.
I'm not so sure about the 0 point anymore.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Like if I'm hearing you right, like
nothing.
Yeah, like self-annihilation.
Yeah.
Self-annihilation, annihilation of the self, extinguishing the self. We talked about this the other night a little bit, about meditation practice. And that's my understanding of, specifically of Zen meditation.
Yeah.
Is just like the self is out. Eventually, that's the goal. And I actually, like all the stuff spinning around in your head when you're trying to meditate, hopefully you get to like a flat line, I guess. Or it just like goes airy and spacious. Oh, but then what?
I like that better, flat line.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, spacious, I suppose. But it seems like one of the things that you're trying to get rid of is imagination. This is a recent kind of thing where it's just like some of the stuff I'm reading. They were like, actually, imagination that's a faculty. It's a great thing to use imagination. So that somehow this is like only after doing this for years, was some kind of acknowledgement that there's actually a lot of worth to imagination and in meditation practice.
Right. So the interior landscape, the idea of drawing from it, do you see any, how do you draw from it but still sort of maintain some purity of that creativity and allowing it to come through? When do you, because it's easy to kind of start going okay, this kind of feels like this, and then but am I changing this?
Oh yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's the hazard of doing it. And I think part of the training is just, a lot of it is how do you translate this stuff that is very ethereal and it's not, whatever, How do you translate it onto a canvas or a piece of paper? And I think it goes down a bumpy path to get there.
Yeah.
And you've got to there's certain sacrifices, I guess, that happen to get there, to put a mark down on the page and have it turn into something.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a great question. I don't know quite how to answer that.
Well, because Charlotte is.
I have a question. Okay, narrative illustration, right? We're talking about narrative illustration, is that the language you're using? Okay, because I know that some of your like big boy heroes are Bruegel and Bosch,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
and I was thinking about translation of time through the artist, like the artist's vessel translation of time. And I hadn't thought about this until today, which was the like paintings with like a lot of figures and characters that are kind of like in relationship to each other, but almost like coming from different dimensions, like in this one. And I don't know, have you thought about that with like the hundreds and hundreds of characters and like a Bruegel or a Bosch and like what they're all doing in relationship to each other? Like I didn't think about it until now as like that's a comic almost. Like it's a whole huge narrative story but just in one panel, not broken up into whatever, a text form, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, a lot of those shrines are
I was
filled
gonna,
it out. Yeah.
my dad's a medievalist, and a lot of medieval art is broken into panels, and now our
Uh-huh.
relationships so single, early Renaissance stuff starts to cram it into one, but
Uh-huh.
medieval stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you go to the medieval section, there's a lot of paintings that are literally broken down into narratives, whatever it is, 12 stages of the cross and 75 pictures or something, you know?
And I think what you're asking is that, and I think you're onto something, is that, these are creative people. Like they've got this canvas and they want the story that they want to tell, even if they've been told to make this passage from the Bible, but they're like, yeah, okay, cool. But like they probably have an interiority for every single one of these sort of beings that are on the canvas to a degree. Maybe not the tiny little marks in the background, but like when you're putting these these beings onto the canvas, like they're there like for a purpose. They're not there just by you're like the experience that this one is having and this one is having, and in the totality of the event that is happening. Like there's this time passage.
Yeah.
So you're telling the story like what I call it, deconstructed narrative that they're weave with you or something. Where just there's this you're taking so unlike comic books, I'll get right to you in a second. Unlike comic books, where you have a linear story that by and large you're telling. In this case, you're taking pieces and you're not being prescriptive like in the story that you're saying. You're kind of giving the space for the viewer to.
So, Grant Morrison?
Yeah.
Do you guys know Grant Morrison? He's like a comic book guy.
Yeah.
The Invisibles and whatever.
He's a very famous writer in the comic book world.
Yeah, he's a very strange dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just listening to an interview with him today, and he was talking about working through the process of the Invisibles, and that he was identifying all of these characters in the story as parts of himself, but simultaneously reading them as deities, because he's kind of a mythologist type. So he was identifying all of these deities at play within the story, and he called it a hyper sigil. A sigil is like a magical
The
Sigil.
Incredibles?
No, the Invisibles. Different story.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, no, I've not heard that. Yeah,
He's pretty
he's
fascinating.
he's an interesting dude.
Yeah. And so as the whole series was unfolding, he was working this whole series of these characters and stuff, and it just resonated, you know. And he talks about the term he uses is a super context.
Okay.
That all of these characters are coming out of a super context, which is a great phrase, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's very.
And
cool.
that's where he's kind of like trying to connect with the super context to like discuss, or to kind of have these characters come through and have them interact.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's something like that going on,
I hope so.
kind of, like, I mean,
You just need fancier words.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, which is what you got.
I think what Charlotte was getting at, I guess, was like my question kind of relates to it, but that all the things going into comic books or these Renaissance narrative paintings are like things that are omnipresent in human beings, and that just the format changes as material circumstances. But yeah, I mean, comic books have like been around now. Comic strips, you know, this kind of language has been around for a while, and I guess obviously things are kind of changing rapidly in society. I mean, do you feel like you're, I don't know, like do you feel like what you're doing is the new evolution of this kind of urge or compulsion or?
Yeah, I guess I don't. I'd like.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, sorry.
So I think maybe he's saying that are you tapping into maybe a new narrative that is sort of contextualized in this time period versus the 150 years of.
Is that like fully like right on fully contemporary or something?
Yeah, I guess like this kind of in these zines and these paintings, it's like there's obviously a narrative, but it's very different than the conventions that have been put in place by the current kind of economic structure of comic books. Like
like the demands are different. Or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess because I'm not answering the publisher.
Right. Yeah.
So. I guess I'm answering to somebody else or something else.
Yourself.
So when you talk about heavy metal, is that more of what the heavy metal was doing, answering those kinds of questions for themselves as the or
Is that what they were doing?
yeah, I mean,
I guess, kind of.
Yes, I mean,
I think they were satisfying their desire. I don't know how long they expected it to last.
yeah, and I also wonder how much of it was done for the purpose, whether they went to publishers and said, hey, how many 6-page stories do you have that we can license from you? Like, I don't know if they were all requested artwork from original artwork, or if it was sort of a reprinting mixed with new stuff. I'm not really sure.
that we're in a new direction. We're just standing on the cusp of an entirely new.
Yeah, are we here on this?
Direction.
I mean, in visual arts, who knows? I mean, we're all standing on the edge, I'm afraid. Yeah. But, so keep working and it will all be there. We'll all go over the edge.
Hopefully at the same time.
Yeah. But I do think, I mean, I definitely think like the old stuff absolutely feeds into it. I mean, I still regularly pull out my Bosch and my Bruegel books and read through it, and I'm like, it's amazing. It's totally relevant. It's totally relevant, this stuff, you know? It's
When you
shocking.
say old stuff, are you thinking of particular, like, this work and old stuff, that kind of?
I mean, it's still colored dirt on canvas. It's still like a dirt stick on a piece of paper. So in that sense, there's something in that that's absolutely traditionally based, you know. And I'm hanging it on the wall, for heaven's sake.
Dirt stick pusher.
Yeah, I'm a dirt stick pusher. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious if you could take us through the process of that small square painting.
This one.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I guess, like pretty much everything in here, even the narratives that are like the comic book panels, start out as sort of like automatic writing. You know, you guys know automatic writing, sort of like the surrealist stuff. So I'll just start out with like squiggles and erase stuff. And
With pencil?
oh, so this would, because it's a painting, I would start out with colors, lines, whatever, scrape it out, obliterate things, and I just kind of keep waiting for something to show up. And in these really abstract ones, unlike the one down here, the knife and the moon, where these figures started to appear as a more sort of, I don't know what, representational, naturalistic thing. These, I think, kind of feed more towards texture, I think, textures. So there's somehow I'm trying to like resonate with something more visceral, I guess.
Are you black and white all in the beginning?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I started piling color in and
Save the thing from yesterday about the listening, like when you're making the squiggles, I think that would be helpful to answer this question.
I don't know what I say, about listening to,
Well, just when you're making marks and then you're waiting for it to
Oh, yeah.
inform you instead of the other way.
yeah, pretty much, I mean, I just kind of keep doing that and scraping things away and adding things until something, I don't, like with the abstract ones, it's a very abstract process where I'm sort of waiting for something to happen. So in a way, it's kind of like, it can just go around and around in circles for endless, and I've usually got multiple things going on at once. And so it's oftentimes working that way, just the nature of paint ends up leaving these amazing, like just beautiful, like, I don't know, little patches of texture and stuff. I'm like, that's fucking beautiful, man. So then I sort of isolate around it, but I've learned sort of the hard way not to fixate too much. So I'm kind of like, that's cool, and I'm gonna get it to like start operating with something else, but it could still, I could still cut it loose, you know? It's just sort of like there's a dialogue that goes on. So maybe that's the listening, you know? I'm just sort of waiting for something to show up. And then I'm listening and I sort of follow the directions, I guess. Follow the directions. I try to just be quiet.
You have a question?
Yeah, kind of interested in something you said about the Renaissance sort of story that you were told, that you learn how to draw, you learn how to paint, you get good at this thing, and then somehow the world is going to make sense, if that's fair. And like you would know what to do with it, or something like that, and how you live that moment when, like, did you ever get the pat on the head? It's like, it's so nice you learn how to draw, but you know, like you study really hard, you get good at this thing, and you expect like
The
world
angels
will-
come
Ah,
down, the Renaissance
right.
angels.
And then, and now what?
Their eggs, they give me like an egg.
Yeah.
God's refrigerator. Your art goes on God's refrigerator. Stop.
Yeah, what happened
Here we
then?
are.
Okay,
Here we are.
No, I mean, no, I think the brutal part of it is, especially like going through the atelier system, is like, I learn how to draw, it's great, and then it's like, get this down, and then it's like, now you gotta start painting, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, and then I start painting, I'm like, I'm just like right at the beginning again, so I'm like, okay. So it's just like this, like,
Well, I have this whole, anybody who draws at any frequency, there's this thing that happens when you draw, especially I guess in comic books, because you have to draw a lot of people all the time.
yeah.
You're self-critical as an artist, and you look at it and go, oh, my hands are terrible. You know, I gotta work harder to get better at drawing hands. And you do the hands, and you get better and better at the hands, and you go, damn, my noses aren't that good. And you start working on the noses, and then you go through the noses, you go through the feet, you go through the shoulders, you go through all these parts, and then you go, God damn it, my hands aren't good.
It never stops. It never ends.
It never stops.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's always a beginning. But at the same time as I say that, because of the school training thing, whatever I was doing, was emulating like 19th century French Academy, and I had read this amazing book. If anybody's interested in like that sort of like period of painting in the French Academy in the 19th century French Academy, something long, not really title. Bohème, I guess was the name. But he was outlining sort of the process that you would go through, and that part of it was like to draw an academy where a nude figure this big and paint it full color. Ta-da! Good job. Get the fuck out. Go do something now. And so I was kind of doing that, and so my goal was to paint like a figure about that big, was to just follow the tradition. And it was freaking hard for that. And then the other thing that starts to happen is you're like, why are my noses always so weird and big? Like, psychologically, what does that mean? It becomes that weird psychological thing, you know? But it was like, I did the drawing, I transferred it onto canvas, I did the underpainting, I did the 1-2 first passes. It had everything, and I was like, holy shit. And the hand was it was the hands. And there was particularly one hand was like, I have no idea how I did that, but it worked. I'm out of here. I'm calling that done. It was, so that was kind of like, you're good. Go do something else. 3 years is a long time. And you didn't even get a piece of paper, so.
You guys, we could wrap it up.
Oh, yes.
It's been,
That's good. Good question here. In the front row.
Real quick, it feels very dystopian. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and are you, if you look by what's happening in the world, and does it come out consciously or begins to show up? It's just like what you're doing, you're working at it, and so you see something versus I'm going to put something on the canvas and I want to express what I'm feeling about that work.
I mean, so that one in particular is loosely, is based, it's called Roadside Picnic. And there was you guys know Tarkovsky, the Russian filmmaker, Tarkovsky? And he did a movie called Stalker, which is an amazing thing to see, actually. And he based that on a Soviet science fiction novel called Roadside Picnic, which is this very, have you read that one? You gotta check that out. It's very strange. And it's like an alien invasion story, kind of, but they don't really know what happened. There's just this place that suddenly appears somewhere in Russia, and all of this weird stuff starts to happen. Like, the physics is all backwards, and it doesn't make any sense, and they have no idea. People go in there, and they wander into the zone, and they turn inside out. And then other people don't. Something else happens. So there's this place that's happening. And so I love the book, I love the movie, and I thought it would be great to do a translation in paint. But if you look at this and you look at the movie, this really has nothing to do with that. But there was a documentary going on at the same time that talked about those two, the book and the novel called Hypernormalization. Because what the hell is that? Does anybody know that documentary? You know that one?
Yeah.
Who is that again?
I can't remember his name. He narrates the whole thing.
It's brilliant. And he has his own kind of style, this English. And it's very like contemporary, like it was just at the cusp, like how did we come up with Donald Trump? How did we get what we got? And sort of the Arab Spring was happening, and he was talking about basically the unraveling of contemporary capitalism and stuff. So that's all swimming around
You
there.
mean now?
Yeah, back then, even, like just sort of the onset of all of this stuff unraveling, and a lot of it around Putin and the Soviet Union and new media and social media, and everything just sort of completely unraveling, and nobody really knowing what to do. And he was comparing that to, there was a state of hypernormalization that the Soviets called it, where everybody knew that it wasn't working anymore, but they didn't know what to do about it. Nobody knew what to do, so they just pretended everything was okay, and they just kept doing what they were doing.